She's not blind, she's just dramatic. Get that dog off my sidewalk!
Her blind daughter a faker, then pepper sprayed her in the eyes. What she didn't know, I'm the assistant commissioner responsible for HOA regulations in this city. She destroyed my daughter's last sliver of vision light perception that meant everything to her. Now I'm about to dismantle everything she's built. Justice is coming, and it will be devastating. Before you watch this full story, please comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Also, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories that need to be heard. My name is Michael Torres, and I'm the Assistant Commissioner of our city's Housing Authority. It's a position of significant power and responsibility, oversee housing regulations, review HOA complaints, and ensure fair housing practices across our entire metropolitan area. But on that sunny October afternoon, that changed everything. I wasn't a government official with authority over neighborhoods across the city. I was just a father watching his entire world collapse in front of his eyes. My daughter Emma is 12 years old and has been completely blind since the day she was born. Despite facing challenges that would break most adults, she's honestly the bravest, strongest person I've ever known in my life. She navigates the world with confidence, using her white cane and her service dog Bailey, a gentle, intelligent golden retriever who's been her faithful eyes and companion for the past 3 years. We had just moved into Meadowbrook Estates about 6 weeks earlier. It was a quiet, peaceful neighborhood with tree-lined streets and well-maintained lawns that stretched out like green carpets. I had chosen this particular community very specifically for Emma's needs. The sidewalks were smooth and wide, absolutely perfect for her to practice her independence and mobility skills. The neighbors had seemed genuinely friendly and welcoming during our first week there. Then we met Karen Mitchell, and everything changed. Karen was the self-appointed queen of the Meadowbrook Estates. HOA, kind of person who wielded her small amount of power like a weapon. She had short blonde hair, styled in that particular way that just screams, "I want to speak to your manager immediately." She wore expensive designer sunglasses even on cloudy days, and drove a white Mercedes SUV with an HOA board member sticker prominently displayed on the back window like some kind of badge of honor. The very first time she knocked on our door, I honestly thought she was just being neighborly, maybe bringing a welcome basket or introducing herself properly. "Your grass is half an inch too tall," she said flatly, thrusting a printed violation notice at me without even a greeting. HOA rules clearly state that the maximum grass height is 3 inches. Yours is currently 3.5 inches. This is unacceptable. I apologized politely and promised to mow it immediately that same afternoon. 2 days later, another violation notice appeared on our door. Our trash bins were still visible from the street at 8:15 in the morning. According to Karen, they should have been stored away by exactly 8 a.m. Then came another notice. Emma's bicycle, a special tandem bike that we rode together so she could experience the joy of cycling, was improperly parked in our own driveway. But I tolerated it all, without complaint. I was incredibly busy with my demanding work, and Emma was still adjusting to her new school, making new friends, and learning new routes. I didn't want neighborhood drama or conflict. I just wanted my daughter to feel safe and happy in our new home. The real trouble started on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon that seemed like any other day. What happened next was so cruel, so unthinkable, that it still haunts me. Stay with me, because what this woman did to my innocent daughter will shock you, and what I did to her in return proves that justice can prevail. The real trouble started on a Wednesday afternoon in late October. Emma had been practicing walking to our mailbox by herself. It was only about 50 feet from our front door, but for her, it represented a major journey toward independence and self-sufficiency. Bailey walked faithfully beside her, alert and protective as always, his training evident in every careful step. I watched from the porch, my heart absolutely swelling with pride, as she confidently tapped her white cane along the smooth sidewalk, counting her steps just like she'd been taught. She reached the mailbox, carefully retrieved our mail with both hands, and turned around to walk back home. That's when Karen's Mercedes came speeding down the street. going at least 40 miles per hour in what was clearly marked as a 25-mile-per-hour residential zone. "Bailey, stop," Emma commanded clearly, and her faithful, well-trained dog immediately halted in his tracks. But Karen slammed on her brakes anyway, her tires screeching loudly against the pavement. She threw open her car door violently and stormed directly toward my daughter with obvious anger on her face. "That dog is a violation," Karen screamed at the top of her lungs. "No pets are allowed in common areas without proper leashes, according to HOA rules." "Ma'am, Bailey is my service dog," Emma said politely, her voice trembling slightly with nervousness. "He's legally allowed to accompany me everywhere. It's federal law." "I don't care about your excuses, or what you think the law says," Karen interrupted harshly, her voice dripping with contempt. "Rules are rules in this neighborhood." I started walking quickly toward them, my protective instincts firing on all cylinders. Something about Karen's aggressive body language set off every alarm bell in my head. "She has one of those emotional support animal certificates or whatever, doesn't she?" Karen sneered, her voice thick with sarcasm. "One of those fake certificates that people just buy online for $20. Bailey is a certified service dog from a licensed training facility," Emma explained patiently, though her small hands were shaking now. "I'm blind, and he helps me navigate safely. He went through 2 years of professional training." "Blind?" Karen actually laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that made my blood run cold. "You're not blind at all. I just saw you looking right at me when I drove up. You're one of those fakers who pretends to be disabled for attention and special treatment." My blood turned to absolute ice in my veins. "Ma'am, please step back from my daughter," I called out firmly, now jogging toward them with growing alarm. But Karen wasn't finished with her attack. She pulled out her phone and started recording Emma, pointing the camera directly at her face. "I'm documenting this violation," she announced loudly, clearly performing for her video. "And I'm reporting this fake service dog to animal control right now. They'll investigate this fraud." Emma's young face crumpled with hurt and confusion. At 12 years old, she was still very much a child, and being publicly accused of lying about her disability was absolutely devastating to her. Her whole body started shaking. Bailey, sensing Emma's increasing distress, immediately positioned himself protectively between Karen and my daughter, a defensive stance he'd been specifically trained for when Emma felt threatened. "Your dog is threatening me?" Karen shrieked dramatically. "He's being aggressive. I feel unsafe." "Bailey, sit," Emma commanded through her tears, her voice breaking. Bailey immediately sat down on his haunches, his tail wagging uncertainly as he tried to understand what was happening. "Please, I'm not faking anything," Emma sobbed, tears now streaming down her face. "I was born 3 months premature, and my optic nerves didn't develop properly. I have an official medical diagnosis from Johns Hopkins Hospital. I have all the documentation." "Shut up with your lies," Karen screamed, her face twisted with rage. And then she did something absolutely unthinkable, something I still have nightmares about. She pulled a canister of pepper spray from her expensive designer purse and sprayed it directly into Emma's face from less than 2 feet away. My daughter's screams will haunt me for the rest of my life. I hear them in my sleep. I hear them when I close my eyes. Emma collapsed to the ground immediately, her small hands clawing desperately at her eyes. Bailey barked frantically, trying to help his girl, but not knowing how. The pepper spray had caught him too, in the toxic cloud, and he whimpered in pain, his eyes streaming. I ran the last few yards and dropped to my knees beside Emma, my heart shattering into pieces. "Dad!" She screamed in absolute agony. "Dad, I can't see. I can't see anything at all. It burns so bad. It burns so bad. Make it stop. Please make it stop. Call 911. I shouted at Karen, but she was already backing away toward her car, her face showing no remorse whatsoever. "She shouldn't have had an illegal animal in the common area," Karen yelled defensively. "This is her fault for breaking the rules. I felt threatened by that dog. She's blind, you monster," I roared, cradling Emma as she sobbed in unbearable agony. "She's a 12-year-old child. She's just a little girl." Karen got in her Mercedes and simply drove away, leaving my daughter writhing in pain on the sidewalk. The ambulance arrived within 8 minutes, but it felt like 8 hours of pure hell. Emma screamed the entire time, continuously begging me desperately to make the burning stop, to help her, to do something. Her eyes were already swollen completely shut, tears and mucus streaming down her inflamed, bright red cheeks. Bailey, still affected by the spray himself, pressed his trembling body against her side, whimpering softly. A neighbor named Mrs. Chen from across the street had witnessed the entire horrific attack. She came running over with bottles of water from her house and helped me gently flush Emma's eyes while we waited for the paramedics to arrive. "I saw everything," Mrs. Chen said, her own eyes filled with tears of anger and sympathy. "I'm calling the police right now. That woman is pure evil, absolutely evil." In the ambulance racing to the hospital, I had no idea just how much damage had been done. What the doctors told us broke my heart into a million pieces. But this is also where our fight for justice truly began. And this Christmas season reminds us that standing up for what's right always matters. In the ambulance, Emma clutched my hand so hard, I thought she might actually break my fingers. "Dad, what if I lose my vision completely?" she whispered between sobs. "What if the little bit of light perception I have is gone forever? What if it's all just darkness now?" My heart absolutely shattered into a million pieces. Most people don't understand that blind doesn't always mean complete, total darkness. Emma had minimal light perceptions. She could tell the difference between bright sunlight and a dark room, though she couldn't see actual shapes, faces, or colors. It wasn't much, but it was something precious to her. It was hers. It connected her to the visual world in some small way. "The doctors will help you, sweetheart," I promised, though fear was clawing at my throat like a wild animal. "Everything will be okay. We'll get through this together." At the hospital, they immediately rushed her to the emergency department. The doctor, a kind, gentle woman named Dr. Patel, examined Emma's eyes with obvious concern on her face. "The pepper spray has caused significant corneal inflammation," Dr. Patel explained to me privately while Emma was being treated. "In a typical patient with healthy eyes, this would heal completely with aggressive treatment over a few weeks. But Emma's condition is seriously complicated by her existing optic nerve issues. The inflammation and chemical exposure could potentially cause additional permanent damage to what limited vision she has." "Could she lose her light perception?" I asked, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay strong. "It's very possible," Dr. Patel said gently, her hand on my shoulder. "We won't know for certain for several days. We'll treat her as aggressively as possible and hope for the absolute best outcome." They admitted Emma overnight for observation and intensive treatment. She lay in that hospital bed with her eyes heavily bandaged, reaching blindly for my hand every few minutes just to make sure I was still there beside her. "I'm scared, Dad," she whispered into the darkness. "I'm so scared." "I know, baby, I know. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." 2 police officers arrived about an hour later to take detailed statements. One of them, Officer Rodriguez, looked genuinely angry as I described exactly what had happened. "We have Mrs. Chen's complete statement and her video footage," Officer Rodriguez said, with obvious disgust in his voice. "The attack is clearly visible. We're issuing an arrest warrant for Karen Mitchell right now. She'll be in custody before morning." "Good," I said coldly. "I want her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I want her to face every possible charge." "Sir, you should also know something," Officer Rodriguez continued. "We ran a background check on Mrs. Mitchell. She has 2 prior incidents of assault on her record. Both were unfortunately pleaded down to simple, disturbing the peace charges. She also has literally dozens of complaints filed against for HOA harassment over the past 5 years. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. This woman had a documented history of violence and harassment, and she'd still been allowed to terrorize an entire neighborhood. She'd still been given power over people's lives. Emma came home 2 days later, but the bandages had to stay on for another week. When they finally came off, the devastating news was confirmed. She had lost a little bit of light perception she'd had. The world was now complete, total darkness, forever. I can't even tell if it's daytime anymore. Dad, she said quietly, sitting on her bed with Bailey's head resting in her lap. It's just nothing. Forever, nothing. Just black emptiness. I held her while she cried, deep, heartbroken sobs that came from somewhere so deep inside her. My strong, brave daughter, who had faced her disability with such incredible courage all these years, was finally breaking, and I couldn't fix it. I couldn't make it better. I couldn't give her back what Karen Mitchell had stolen. The doorbell rang constantly over the next few days. Neighbors brought food, and flowers, and cards. Mrs. Chen visited every single day without fail, bringing homemade soup and sitting with Emma for hours, reading to her, describing the world outside the window in beautiful detail. But Emma barely ate. She barely spoke. She stopped practicing with her cane. She stopped doing all the things that had made her feel independent and capable. "What's the point?" she asked one evening, her voice flat and defeated. "I try so hard to be normal, to do things by myself, to be independent, and this is what happens. Someone hurts me because they think I'm faking. Why should I even try anymore? What's the point of anything?" Those words broke something fundamental inside me. I had always taught Emma to be strong, to not let her disability define who she was, to fight for her rightful place in the world. But how could I ask her to keep fighting when the world kept viciously kicking her down? Karen Mitchell was arrested, but her high priest lawyer got her out on bail the very same day. $20,000 pocket change to someone like her, apparently. Just another bill to pay. And then the real nightmare began, in earnest. Karen started an aggressive social media campaign to defend herself and attack us. She posted on the neighborhood Facebook group, claiming she was the real victim. "I was threatened by an aggressive, unleashed dog," her post read. "I defended myself appropriately with pepper spray, and now I'm being viciously attacked by a family with a fake service dog. They're trying to ruin my reputation and destroy my life because I simply enforce HOA rules fairly. Please support me during this incredibly difficult time." The comment section absolutely exploded. Some people defended Emma strongly, but many others believed Karen's version of events. They didn't know Emma. They didn't know us. They didn't know the truth. They just saw a well-dressed, articulate woman in expensive clothes claiming to be persecuted. "This is America," one comment read. "Everyone claims to have a service dog nowadays. You can buy those certificates online for $20. Karen was absolutely right to defend herself. HOA board members work incredibly hard to maintain our property values, another person wrote. People hate them just for doing their job. This family is clearly looking for a payday. I wanted desperately to respond, to scream at these strangers who knew absolutely nothing about what really happened. But my lawyer firmly advised against it. "Let the criminal case speak for itself," he counseled. "Don't engage on social media. It never helps." But watching my daughter suffer while her attacker played the victim and gained sympathy was absolute torture. I'd taken time off work to care for Emma, but eventually I had to return to my job at the housing authority. What I discovered when I got back changed everything. Sometimes the universe gives you exactly the tools you need for justice. I had taken a full week off work to care for Emma, but eventually I had to return to my position at the housing authority. I didn't tell anyone at work what had happened to us. I couldn't. I was the assistant commissioner, a position of significant authority and responsibility. I was supposed to be composed, professional, and completely objective in all my decisions. But inside, I was screaming. Inside, I was planning. My job involved overseeing affordable housing programs across the entire city, reviewing hundreds of HOA complaints and disputes, and ensuring strict compliance with fair housing practices. I handled hundreds of cases every single month. Disputes between residents and their HOAs, accessibility complaints, discrimination allegations, and zoning issues. It was important work, but mostly routine until one particular file landed on my desk exactly 3 weeks after the attack. The complaint was from a resident at Meadowbrook Estates, my own neighborhood. I felt my hands start to tremble as I opened it. HOA President Karen Mitchell is systematically violating federal fair housing laws, the complaint read in neat, precise handwriting. She has harassed multiple residents with disabilities, issued completely bogus fines designed to force people out, and created a hostile, discriminatory environment. I'm filing a formal complaint and requesting a full official investigation. My hands actually shook as I read the detailed documentation. The complainant was Mr. Harold Green, an elderly veteran in a wheelchair who lived 3 streets over from us. Karen had fined him repeatedly over and over again for having a wheelchair ramp installed without prior architectural approval, even though federal law specifically protected his absolute right to accessibility modifications. There were 3 other similar complaints attached to his filing. A woman with multiple sclerosis had been fined repeatedly for installing a handicap parking sign in her own driveway. A deaf couple who had been denied approval for a doorbell camera system they desperately needed for safety reasons. A family with an autistic child who had been cited dozens of times for excessive noise when their child had meltdowns. Karen Mitchell had been systematically targeting the most vulnerable people in our neighborhood for years, and now she had blinded my daughter. I sat at my desk staring at that file for what felt like hours. My assistant knocked quietly and peeked her head in. "Sir, are you all right? You've been staring at that same file for over 20 minutes. Reschedule all my afternoon appointments," I said quietly, my voice steady and cold. "I need to review this case extremely thoroughly." I assigned the Meadowbrook Estates case directly to myself. Normally, I would delegate such investigations to my experienced staff members, but not this time. This time, I wanted to handle every single detail personally. I spent the next 2 solid weeks conducting the most thorough, meticulous investigation of my entire career. I personally interviewed every single resident who had filed any complaint against Karen or the HOA. I reviewed 5 complete years of HOA meeting minutes, reading every word. I examined every fine that had been issued, every violation notice that had been sent, and every architectural decision Karen had made as HOA president. The pattern that emerged was absolutely clear and completely damning. Karen Mitchell had systematically harassed anyone she deemed undesirable for years. People with disabilities, elderly residents, families with young children, single parents, anyone who couldn't easily fight back against her authority. She had issued literally thousands of dollars in completely bogus fines over the years. She had rejected dozens of reasonable accommodation requests that were specifically protected by federal law. She had created an environment of fear and intimidation throughout the entire community, and the HOA board had let her do all of it because she was effective at maintaining property values their only real concern. I compiled a 200-page report documenting every single violation in excruciating detail. Federal Fair Housing Act violations, Americans with Disabilities Act violations, state housing discrimination laws, city ordinances. The list was extensive and devastating. Then I scheduled an official hearing with the city attorney and the Fair Housing Commission. The day of the official hearing arrived, and Karen Mitchell had absolutely no idea what was about to hit her. What happened next was the sweetest justice I've ever witnessed, and it proves that this Christmas season, good really can triumph over evil. The official hearing was scheduled for a cold December morning, exactly 6 weeks after Karen had attacked Emma. The entire Meadowbrook Estates HOA board was legally required to attend. Karen sat at the defendant's table with her expensive lawyer, still wearing her designer sunglasses indoors, still radiating that same entitled arrogance. She didn't know who I really was. She had never bothered to ask my name or my occupation during any of our brief interactions. To her, I was just another ordinary resident she could bully and intimidate. The absolute shock on her face when I walked to the front of the hearing room was almost worth everything Emma had suffered. Almost. "Good morning," I said calmly, addressing the room full of officials, lawyers, residents, and reporters. My name is Michael Torres, Assistant Commissioner of Housing for this city. I'm here today to present the findings of our extensive investigation into Meadowbrook Estates HOA and its president, Karen Mitchell. Karen's face went completely pale. Her lawyer leaned over urgently to whisper to her, his expression alarmed. I presented my evidence methodically, piece by devastating piece. Every discriminatory fine, every rejected accommodation request, every victim's heartbreaking testimony, every violation of federal law. Mrs. Mitchell has created a clear, documented pattern of harassment, specifically targeting protected classes under federal law. I explained, my voice steady and professional. She has violated federal fair housing laws on at least 47 documented occasions over the past 5 years alone. I displayed photos on the large screen. Mr. Green, in his wheelchair, holding up the stack of violation notices he'd received for his medically necessary ramp. The deaf couple explained how unsafe they felt without their security camera system. The mother of the autistic child describes her son's fear of even playing in their own backyard. And then I showed the hospital photos of Emma. The entire room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Emma's swollen, severely damaged eyes filled the screen, her tear-stained face. The bandages covered half her small face. The fear and pain are evident in every pixel. This is my daughter, I said, my voice steady, despite the emotion threatening to break through. Emma Torres, age 12, has been blind since birth due to premature birth complications. On October 23rd, Mrs. Mitchell was pepper-sprayed directly in the face at close range, causing severe and permanent damage to her already compromised vision. My daughter has now lost all remaining light perception. She will live in complete, total darkness for the rest of her life because of this woman's cruelty. Karen tried to interrupt, half-raising from her seat. That's not. I was defending myself from silence. The hearing officer commanded sharply. You will have your opportunity to speak, Mrs. Mitchell. Sit down. I continued presenting the evidence. Police reports, hospital records, Mrs. Chen's clear video testimony, expert medical opinions. The evidence was absolutely overwhelming. Mrs. Mitchell attacked a disabled child, I said, letting each word land with full weight. A child who was simply checking the mail with her legally certified service dog. She did this because she has spent years believing she is above the law, that HOA rules matter more than human rights, more than federal law, more than basic human decency. I paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the silent room. This investigation has revealed systematic discrimination, extensive harassment, and now violent assault. Mrs. Mitchell and the HOA board that enabled her for years must be held fully accountable. The hearing officer's decision was swift and absolutely severe. The evidence presented by Commissioner Torres is clear, compelling, and deeply disturbing, she announced. Karen Mitchell and the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board have engaged in extensive, egregious, fair housing violations. Our findings are as follows. First, Mrs. Karen Mitchell is permanently banned from serving in any HOA leadership position anywhere in this city. Second, the current HOA board is dissolved immediately and completely. A court-appointed administrator will oversee the HOA until fair elections can be held. Third, Meadowbrook Estates HOA is fined $500,000 for fair housing violations. These funds will be distributed directly to all victims of discrimination. Fourth, all residents who were improperly fined will receive full refunds plus substantial damages. Fifth, a consent decree will be entered, requiring the HOA to undergo comprehensive fair housing training and submit to monitoring. For 5 years, Karen jumped to her feet, her face bright red. You can't do this. I have rights. I was just protecting the neighborhood. I was doing my job. You attacked a blind child, the hearing officer said coldly, her voice like ice. You are extremely fortunate these are only civil penalties. Your criminal trial for assault hasn't even begun yet. You're looking at significant prison time. The reality finally seemed to hit Karen. Her expensive lawyer was frantically writing notes. The other board members looked absolutely stunned. "This hearing is adjourned," the officer announced with finality. As people filed out, several residents approached me with tears in their eyes. Mr. Green wheeled up to me, his weathered face wet with tears. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "I've lived in fear for 3 years. Thank you for finally standing up for all of us." The mother of the autistic child hugged me tightly. "My son can finally play outside again without being afraid." But their gratitude, while deeply meaningful, couldn't heal Emma's eyes. It couldn't give her back what she'd lost. Karen's criminal trial took place in February, 3 months after the attack. Her defense attorney tried every possible angle: self-defense, reasonable fear of an aggressive dog, misunderstanding of service animal laws, temporary insanity, everything. But the evidence was absolutely irrefutable. Mrs. Chen's video showed everything in crystal clear detail. Karen is screaming at a child. The child is trying desperately to explain. Bailey is sitting calmly, perfectly behaved. And then the deliberate, calculated attack with pepper spray. The prosecution called Emma to testify. My brave daughter walked slowly to the witness stand, with her white cane, Bailey at her side, as always. She wore dark glasses to hide her damaged eyes. Her voice shook as she was sworn in. "Emma, can you tell the court what happened on October 23rd? The prosecutor asked gently. Emma described the incident in heartbreaking detail. How she had been practicing her independence. How proud she had felt checking the mail by herself. How Karen had screamed at her, called her a faker, refused to believe she was really blind. "And then she sprayed something in my face," Emma said softly, her voice barely audible. "It burned so badly. I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die. I kept calling for my dad, but everything was just pain, and I couldn't see him. And I could always at least see the light where he was standing before." She started crying silently, tears running down her cheeks behind her dark glasses. "Now I can't see anything at all. Not even a little bit of light. It's just darkness. Forever darkness. And I'll never know what my dad looks like. I'll never see colors, or sunsets, or stars, or anything ever again." There wasn't a dry eye in the entire courtroom. Even the bailiff was wiping his eyes. Karen's lawyer tried to cross-examine Emma, attempting to suggest she had somehow provoked the attack. But even he seemed to realize how badly it was going when the judge interrupted sharply. "Counsel, the victim is a blind 12-year-old child. I strongly suggest you tread very carefully here." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They came back with their verdict: guilty on all counts. Assault of a minor, assault of a disabled person, violation of federal disability rights laws, hate crime enhancement. The judge sentenced Karen to 3 years in prison, plus 5 years of supervised probation. She was also ordered to pay $750,000 in damages to our family for Emma's medical bills, ongoing therapy, and pain and suffering. Karen screamed at the judge, her composure finally completely shattered. "This is insane. This is a miscarriage of justice. I was defending myself. That girl is a liar. She's faking." "Mrs. Mitchell," the judge said sternly, his voice hard as steel. "You permanently blinded a disabled child because you couldn't be bothered to listen to her explanation for even 30 seconds. You then lied about it repeatedly on social media and attempted to destroy this family's reputation to save yourself. You have shown absolutely no remorse whatsoever throughout this entire process. 3 years is actually the minimum sentence I can legally impose, and frankly, it's nowhere near enough. Bailiff, remove her from my courtroom immediately." As Karen was led away in handcuffs, still screaming about injustice, she made eye contact with me one final time. She finally understood who I was, what I was capable of, how completely she had destroyed her own life by attacking my daughter. But I felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory, no joy at all, because Emma was still blind, and no prison sentence would ever change that fundamental fact. Spring came to Meadowbrook Estates, and the neighborhood looked completely different now. The new HOA board, elected by residents who were absolutely sick of Karen's tyranny, transformed the entire community. Mr. Green's wheelchair ramp not only stayed, but became a model for accessibility improvements throughout the neighborhood. The deaf couple's security system was actually upgraded at HOA expense. The autistic child played freely in his yard, and neighbors smiled and waved instead of complaining. People called our house regularly to apologize, to say they should have stood up to Karen sooner, to thank me for ending her reign of terror. But I didn't want thanks or apologies. I wanted my daughter to see again, and that was impossible. Emma was still struggling deeply. She had started intensive therapy to deal with the trauma, just of the attack itself, but of losing the little bit of vision she'd had. Depression had gripped her tightly in its claws. "What's the point of going outside?" she'd ask, her voice flat. "What's the point of trying to be independent when people hate me just for being blind?" But slowly, very gradually, Emma started to heal emotionally. Mrs. Chen kept visiting faithfully, becoming like a grandmother to Emma. Mr. Green taught Emma to appreciate music in entirely new ways. The autistic child's mother brought her son over to play, and they became close friends. The community that had once turned a blind eye to Karen's cruelty became a support system for my daughter. It's been over a year since the attack now, and Emma has grown in ways I never imagined possible. What she's accomplished, despite everything she lost, will restore your faith in the human spirit this Christmas season. It's been over a year since the attack. Karen is still in prison, and Emma is 13 now, about to turn 14. She's not the same girl she was before. How could she be? She's been through trauma that would absolutely break most adults. But she's also stronger, more resilient, more determined. Last month, Emma gave a powerful speech at a major disability rights conference. She stood at the podium with Bailey by her side, her voice clear and steady and strong. "My name is Emma Torres, and I want to tell you about the day I became completely blind," she began. She told the whole story, the attack, the hospital, the darkness, the despair, the fear. But then she talked about what came after. "For a long time, I was so angry," Emma said. "Angry at Karen Mitchell for hurting me. Angry at the world for being so cruel. Angry at myself for being blind. But my dad taught me something incredibly important. He showed me that justice matters, that standing up for what's right matters. That one person really can make a difference." She paused, her hand resting on Bailey's head. "My dad investigated the HOA that protected my attacker. He found all the other people Karen had hurt and helped them get justice, too. He showed me that disability rights aren't just words on paper. They're real, and they're worth fighting for. So yes, I'm blind, completely blind now, thanks to Karen Mitchell. But I'm not helpless. I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor, and I'm going to spend my life making sure what happened to me never happens to another kid with a disability, ever." The audience gave her a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. I stood in the back of the room, tears streaming down my face, more proud than I had ever been in my entire life. 6 months ago, I received a letter from Karen Mitchell's attorney. She wanted to apologize to Emma, he said. The attorney claimed Karen had gone through extensive therapy in prison and finally understood the full gravity of what she had done. I threw the letter in the trash without a second thought. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived. This one was from Karen directly, written in shaky handwriting on prison stationery. "Dear Emma," it began. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I destroyed your life in a moment of cruelty and stupidity. I think about what I did every single day. I see your face when I close my eyes. I hear your screams in my nightmares. I almost threw this letter away, too. But something made me keep reading. I grew up believing that being in control meant being powerful. Enforcing rules made me important. That people who didn't fit my narrow view of normal were somehow less than me. I was wrong about everything. Prison has taught me what real powerlessness feels